You value his presence above everything else. That's where it begins. That's where it always begins. It's not in the multitude of good works, nor in the length of your prayers, nor in how many scriptures you've memorized. It begins with hunger, with a cry in your spirit that says, if your presence does not go with me, I do not want to go. It is not something you can pretend. It cannot be mimicked or taught. It is born in the soul of the one who has tasted him, just one drop, and nothing else will satisfy again. It is the desperate heartbeat of David when he cried, cast me not away from thy presence, and take not thy Holy Spirit from me. It is the yearning of Moses who said, show me your glory. These were not men without flaws, but they were men with hunger, and that hunger brought them into intimacy. To walk with God, you must place his presence above applause, above comfort, above clarity, and even above blessings. It is when you reach the place where you would rather feel him than understand him, rather obey him than be approved by people, rather linger in his presence than move ahead in your own timing. That's when the walk begins. Not a sprint, not a race for titles, a walk with him, side by side. By breath, you will begin to notice something changes in you. The things that once thrilled you don't anymore. The conversations you once entertained now grieve you. The places you once ran to now feel hollow. You lose your appetite for what's shallow and your soul begins to crave depth. You look around at the noise of the world and you say, where is he? And in that whisper, he answers. People may not understand you. Even those in ministry may look at your stillness and call it passivity. They do not know what it is to tremble under the weight of his nearness. They do not understand why you pause when others rush. But you are walking with him. Every moment has become holy. Every room becomes a sanctuary when he enters. Every decision is filtered through the question, will this make me closer to him or pull me away? There will be days you feel nothing. Silence, stillness, absence, but the walk continues. Because his presence is not just in feeling, it is in faith. You begin to carry a consciousness of him. You carry it into the store, into your job, into your kitchen, into your midnight hour. And you may be washing dishes and tears begin to fall, not from sorrow, but because you feel him so near. He is not a Sunday morning visitation. He is your daily companion. And once you've known that, once you've tasted that, once you've been ruined for everything else, there is no going back. Others may chase platforms. You chase presence. Others may crave recognition. You crave communion. Others may be impressed by knowledge. You are moved only by nearness. The secret of walking with God begins with the secret place. Not crowded with music, not filled with requests. Just him. Just you. Just stillness. The heart that says you are enough. You are all I want. You begin to see him in everything. In the sunrise, in a stranger's kindness, in the wind that brushes your face, in the gentle correction that draws you deeper. You begin to love what he loves and grieve what he grieves. His presence doesn't just comfort you, it transforms you. You begin to look more like him, and you don't even realize it, but people begin to notice. They say things like, there's something different about you. And you smile, not because of who you are, but because of who you walk with. And yet you take no credit. For the closer you walk, the more aware you become of how holy he is, and how unworthy you are. But grace, grace keeps drawing you in. Grace says, keep walking. Grace says, I've chosen you not because you're worthy, but because you're willing. Grace says, as long as you value me above all, I will walk with you. The noise fades, the distractions lose their power, and you find yourself whispering again and again in every season of life, don't take your presence from me. You obey even when it costs you everything. That is one of the most sacred evidences that you are truly walking with God. Not partial obedience, not delayed obedience, not comfortable obedience, but the kind of obedience that pulls tears from your eyes and surrender from your will. The kind of obedience that breaks your heart while preserving your soul. This is not the obedience that comes because the outcome is easy or the path is clear. This is the obedience that comes when all you have is a word from God and a trembling yes in your spirit. It is a beautiful thing, to hear his voice. But hearing means nothing if it does not lead to heeding. The walk with God is not paved with emotion. It is paved with obedience. The Lord is not looking for those who feel deeply. He's looking for those who follow fully. He's not impressed by our expressions of love. He is moved by our demonstrations of trust. Obedience is love's proof. Jesus said, "If you love me, keep my commandments." And when he said it, he wasn't asking for perfection. He was asking for surrender, for trust. Obedience that costs you nothing proves very little. Anyone can obey when it makes sense. Anyone can obey when the reward is instant and the sacrifice is minimal. But when God asks you to walk away from what you wanted, when he asks you to stay when you'd rather leave, when he asks you to give what you've been saving or forgive who's been wounding, then the truth comes out. Then the depth of your walk is revealed. Are you obeying because you trust his ways? Moses gave up a palace to identify with God's people. Esther risked her life to speak truth. Jeremiah wept alone while declaring God's word to a rebellious nation. Paul lost his reputation, his freedom, his comfort, and counted it all as dung for the sake of knowing Christ. And Jesus, although he were a son, yet he learned obedience through the things which he suffered. Even he, the sinless one, walked the road of obedience unto death. There is a sacred suffering that comes with saying yes to God. Not suffering caused by disobedience or sin, but the suffering of a yielded will. It is the ache of laying your Isaac on the altar, not knowing if you'll get him back. It is the pain of trusting God's character when his commands seem to contradict your understanding. And yet in that holy place, in that crushing, in that nevertheless, not my will but yours be done, something eternal is birthed. You begin to realize that obedience is not just about inaction, it's about alignment. It is a declaration in the spirit that says, I trust you more than I trust me. And when God sees that, when he sees a heart that obeys without full explanation, a will that bows before the answer comes, a life that follows him when no one else is watching, he draws near. His presence rests upon that kind of vessel, not because it is surrendered, because it is surrendered. You may lose opportunities, you may lose relationships, you may even lose dreams, but you will never lose him. And in the end, that is all that will matter. Because to obey God, truly obey him, is to tell the world that he is worth everything, that his voice is louder than public opinion, that his presence is more precious than human approval, that his ways are better, even when they are harder. And the beautiful thing, the thing the world cannot understand is this. The more it costs you to obey him, the closer he comes to you. You may walk through fire, but he'll be the fourth man in the flames. You may walk through loss, but you'll find him as the treasure hidden in the field. You may walk through rejection, but you'll know the embrace of the one who will never leave you. Because to walk with God is to walk the path of obedience, and that obedience will always cost you something's everything, but the reward is him. His nearness, his smile, his hand guiding yours, and when you have him, you realize you never really lost anything at all. You become more aware of eternity than the present moment. That's when something shifts in your spirit. You are no longer driven by the urgency of the temporary. You are anchored by the weight of the eternal. The applause of men begins to fade. The trends of the world lose their pull. What used to excite you now feels shallow. What used to offend you now seems small, because your eyes have seen something greater, your heart has touched something deeper. Eternity begins to whisper louder than circumstance. And when you've heard that whisper, you can never go back to living for this world the same way again. It happens quietly, not all at once. You don't even realize it at first, but the Holy Spirit begins to shift your perspective. He lifts your eyes. He recalibrates your vision. You begin to discern what is temporary from what is eternal, not with your intellect, but with your spirit. You feel the brevity of life in a way that sobers you, not depresses you. You no longer ask, does this make me happy? But does this make me holy? You don't just wonder, how will this affect today? But how will this echo in eternity? You stop living as if this life is all there is. You stop fighting for every comfort, every right, every recognition. Because you've seen a city not made with hands. You felt the tug of another world. And it ruins you for lesser things. You begin to live with the awareness that this world is not your home. You are passing through. A pilgrim, a sojourner, one whose citizenship is in heaven. You are not indifferent to the world, but you are no longer imprisoned by it. You serve, you love, you give, but your roots are not here. Your anchor is in the unseen. It affects how you spend your time. You no longer waste hours chasing what will not matter 10 minutes into eternity. You start investing in what lasts. Souls, truth, worship, prayer, obedience, love. These things take on a new weight. They are no longer spiritual options. They are eternal imperatives. You begin to evaluate your conversations, your motives, your decisions through a new lens. Will this please the Father? Will this build up others? Will this carry into the next life or burn up like straw in the wind? Even your pain takes on new meaning. You begin to see trials not just as interruptions, but as invitations, opportunities to be conformed into the image of Christ. You remember that these light and momentary afflictions are producing for you a far more exceeding and eternal weight of glory. You are not crushed by suffering. You are clarified by it. You weep, yes, but not as one without hope. You groan, but with a longing for what's ahead. You carry a vision beyond the grave, and that vision gives you endurance. And when the enemy tempts you to settle, to live small, to compromise, to choose what's easy instead of what's right, you remember that crowns are not handed out for comfort. They are given to those who endure, those who finish, those who walk faithfully. You remember that the applause of heaven is louder than the applause of earth, even if it's not heard yet. You remember that Jesus is coming again, not as a baby in a manger, but as a king on the clouds. And you want to be found ready. Clean hands, pure heart, lamp burning, life in order. This awareness doesn't make you strange. It makes you steady. While others panic, you are anchored. While others chase trends, you chase truth. While others crave control, you walk in peace. Because you know this life is a vapor, a breath, a shadow. And what's unseen is more real than what's seen. You begin to hear the heartbeat of heaven in the middle of your daily routine. Eternity invades the ordinary, and you begin to live every moment with your eyes on the invisible, your heart set on the eternal. The things of earth grow dim, not because they're always evil, but because they're not enough, not anymore. You've been marked by something deeper, something weightier, something real. And the more you walk with God, the more you feel it. This world is not your home. Your eyes are fixed on the finish line. Your treasure is not in your bank account, but in heaven. Your reward is not in public praise, but in the Father's approval. And every step you take, every choice you make is shaped by that glorious unseen reality, eternal. You trust His silence as much as His voice. That's not an easy place to arrive at. It's a sacred place. Just because He isn't speaking doesn't mean He has stopped working. You learn over time to stop panicking in the pause. You stop doubting every delay. You stop questioning His character every time you can't trace His hand. Because something deeper than feeling begins to anchor you, trust. There was a time when you needed a word every moment, a sign for every step, a confirmation for every decision. You were afraid of the silence, afraid of stillness, afraid of the space between answers. But then he allowed the silence to become your teacher. And you learned that silence is not rejection, it's refinement. It's in the quiet that your roots go deeper. It's in the quiet that your motives are revealed. It's in the quiet that you realize you didn't love him just for his voice. You loved him for who he is. Some of the most powerful seasons of your life will be the ones where God says nothing at all. You'll wake up in the morning and feel nothing. You'll pray and hear nothing. You'll wait, and it seems like heaven has closed its doors. But if you stay long enough, if you don't rush, if you don't run, if you don't retreat, you'll find something sacred hidden there. You'll find a presence that doesn't need to say a word to be real. You'll find a peace that surpasses understanding, not because you heard a fresh word, but because you stood on the last one. The silence of God is not always punishment. It is often preparation. It is in the silence that character is formed. It is in the silence that pride is stripped. It is in the silence that faith is tested. And faith that has not been tested cannot be trusted. Abraham waited in silence for decades for a promise that came by one word. Joseph sat in prison for years with no new revelation, only holding on to what God had shown him in a dream. Jesus hung on a cross, surrounded by mockery, pierced by pain, and the Father was silent. But heaven's silence did not mean heaven's absence. When you begin to trust his silence, you stop needing constant signs to feel secure. You stop needing everything to make sense. You begin to walk by faith, not by sight. You begin to live by trust, not by explanation. You don't serve God for what he says, you serve him for who he is. And you know that even in silence, he is still sovereign. Even in silence, he is still faithful. Even in silence, he is still working behind the curtain of time to bring all things together for your good. You begin to realize that the silence is sometimes the greatest compliment. God trusts you enough to not hold your hand like a child. He trusts you to stand on what he's already said. He trusts you to remember his track record. He trusts you to walk even when there's no fresh instruction. And you trust him not just when the fire falls, but when the cloud lingers. Not just when the doors open, but when they stay shut. The silence becomes a sacred place where you learn to lean, not just listen. You stop demanding that he speak on your schedule. You stop measuring intimacy by how many goosebumps you feel. You learn to rest in knowing that he is near even when he is quiet. That his presence is steady even when his voice is still. You begin to live with a faith that doesn't flinch and a heart that doesn't wander just because heaven doesn't respond in the way you expected. You stop needing to be in control. You stop rushing the process. You stop searching for voices that only echo your impatience, and instead you settle into stillness, not because you've given up, but because you've grown up. You'll learn that trusting God means trusting all of him, not just the parts you understand, his timing, his wisdom, his ways, his silence. And in that holy silence, he's doing more than you think. He's aligning things you cannot see. He's softening hearts you cannot reach. He's orchestrating divine timing that would fall apart if rushed. You don't have to see it. You don't have to feel it. You just have to trust it. Because the same God who spoke the world into existence with a word can hold your life together with his silence. You reflect his nature more than your personality. That's when you know he's truly taken over. That's when you know you're not just a follower in word, but in image. It's when you begin to fade and he begins to shine through. It's no longer about how you would respond, how you would speak, how you would feel. It's about how he would. Something internal begins to shift. The edge in your voice softens. The pride in your posture bows, the self-protection in your decisions melts away. People don't just encounter you anymore. They begin to encounter him in you. Personality is the surface. It's what people first meet. It's your wiring, your background, your tone, your expression. But nature, that's the deeper current. That's the divine imprint. It's not about temperament. It's about transformation. It's not about being introverted or extroverted, soft-spoken or bold. It's about being Christ-like. You don't stop being you, but the you gets crucified daily so that he can be seen clearly. You don't become fake. You become refined. The parts of you that used to be justified as a just my personality now get laid at his feet. You begin to say, "Oh Lord, I know I've always been like this, but I don't want that part of me to overshadow you." The fruit of the Spirit is not an extension of your personality. It's the evidence of his presence. Love when you feel betrayed, joy when you feel forgotten, peace when you should be anxious, patience when you're under pressure, kindness when you're dealing with cruelty, goodness when no one's watching, faithfulness when no one's applauding, gentleness when you've been misunderstood, self-control when everything in your flesh wants to react. None of that is personality. It's all Jesus. It's what happens when you've spent enough time with him that your nature starts to resemble his. You'll start to notice this transformation not in your loudest moments, but in your quietest. It won't be on the platform. It'll be in traffic, in conflict, in the waiting room, in the conversation that tests every nerve in your body. And suddenly, instead of saying what you want to say, you'll pause. Instead of proving your point, you'll yield. Instead of defending your ego, you'll protect your witness. Not because you're weak, but because he's strong in you. Not because you're fake, but because you're crucified. People will try to draw out the old version of you. Situations will demand the flesh to rise again, but it doesn't. You won't always feel victorious, but you'll notice the power to choose differently, to pause, to pray, to extend grace. That's not a personality shift. That's divine evidence. That's what it means to walk in the Spirit. That's what it means to live a life where his nature is more visible than your past, more audible than your preference, more present than your reputation. It doesn't happen overnight. It's not a one-time prayer. It's a daily surrender, a moment-by-moment yielding, a constant awareness that people aren't just listening to your message, they're reading your manner. They aren't just watching your gifts, they're watching your grace. They aren't just paying attention to what you say about God. They're paying attention to whether he shows up in the way you speak, in the way you carry pain, in the way you handle honor, in the way you respond to pressure. When his nature begins to shape you, it changes how you see others. You stop labeling them by what they've done and start loving them for who they can become. You stop filtering them through your mood and start seeing them through his mercy. You stop seeking relationships that serve you and start being a vessel that serves him. Wherever he places you, you love deeper, forgive quicker, judge slower. Why? Because your personality has moved to the back seat and his nature is driving now. You'll hear him in the tension. You'll feel him in the silence. And in places where your old personality would have taken control, his Spirit will now take over. You'll find yourself blessing those who curse you, praying for those who misuse you, holding your tongue when gossip feels justified, speaking life when you'd rather stay silent. That's not emotional maturity, that's spiritual transformation. That's what happens when you've walked close enough to the Holy One that your reflection stops looking like you and starts looking like him. You're not trying to impress, you're not trying to outperform, you're just yielding, trusting, walking, abiding. And little by little, piece by piece, he becomes visible, not just in your gifts, but in your gaze, not just in your calling, but in your character, not just in your words, but in your way. And the world begins to take notice, not because you're loud, but because you're like him.